right. We'll continue taking your phone calls, feedback, texts, and tweets. Text at 97136. Tweets at Gator971. And your phone calls at 248-539-9797. But there was some interesting reporting done by the Athletics' Chris Burke when it comes to Darius Slay. A lot of numbers and a lot of comps in terms of contracts put out there. I'm going to read in part what Chris Burke had to write. He writes about Matthew Stafford's 2017 extension. When he signed the deal where the $136 million or whatever it was, sorry, I can't see because where I stapled the paper. My bad. But we all know he became the highest paid player in league history. He wasn't even the best quarterback in his own division at the time, although he might be now, let alone the greatest quarterback the NFL has ever seen. But his existing contract and play ahead of the extension demanded the Lions step up to the plate, so they did. As with Stafford, the goal isn't necessary to lock up a superstar in a bargain deal in the moment. It's to have that deal look like a bargain down the road. That record-setting Stafford deal now barely cracks the top 10 at his position and could fall out of that standing this offseason, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. Stafford's contract might have him outside of the top 10 of quarterbacks this offseason.
Well, we did kind of mention that when he signed the contract.
We said it would happen, but in that moment of time, it was a very difficult thing for people to digest. But meanwhile, when your contract is up, in a world where the cap goes up every year, the players' salaries go up. So if you're good, there's a good chance you're going to get a raise above and beyond what somebody better than you who signed their contract 3 years ago got.
Yeah, I would suspect that his next contract will not be as good as the contract he's got now. I don't think for annual salary.
Probably not. Probably won't be, but it depends on a number of factors. But so Spot Track does a market value calculator, which is you compared to similar players, what they make when they sign their contracts, what percentage of the cap it took up, and what you should be getting under the current market with the current cap.
Mm-hmm.
It spits out a projected worth for Darius Slay of 4 years at $15.5 million per season. So Xavier Howard has the highest contract for a corner. If Howard is worth $15.1 million and everything, contract, salary, cap continue to escalate, that's a natural landing spot.
So 4 years, $62 million, somewhere there.
Yeah. However, there's a few things that kind of impacted other than just that. Slay was one of the biggest bargains in the NFL in 2017. He outplayed the $12 million per year contract and way outplayed what he earned in 2018 and way outplayed what he earned in 2017. So he signed a contract, it appears that Slay wants to be paid for being underpaid the last couple of years, which isn't that unusual in the NFL for players. In fact, they said that's how Stafford got his contract. This, according to Chris Burke.
That talks about 2017 2018. What about his 2019 season?
It doesn't really say because I think I'd have to go back and look. Because this is a really complicated piece, as you might imagine.
Sure, but it's pointing out those 2 years, and it omits the 2019 year, which I think is very important because if he didn't outperform his 2019 contract, then you see him starting to level back off, right?
Yeah. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute because, like I said, it's damn complicated. But let me move on while I continue to search for that. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler reported that Slay and the Lions continue to discuss a long-term contract, but the expectation exists that he could re-enter the trade market if no deals reached in the coming weeks, since Slay has taken to Twitter on several occasions to comment on his situation. The last link, there is a Slay quote tweet, of Quandre Diggs, who suggested 4 years, $68 million as a fair deal for his former teammate. So Spot Track says 4 years, 62. Slay seems to endorse what Diggs said, 4 years, 68. I mentioned yesterday that at the very least, if I were running the Lions, Darius Slay, who just turned 29, would be a Detroit Lion for the next 2 years for sure. The last year of his contract and then the franchise year, which would pay him roughly $14.5 million. Then he'd be going into his the season where he'd turn 31 as a free agent. And if he got franchised, I feel like there's no way in hell he'd come back here. Personally, I think he'd hit the market and he'd be gone. Or do you basically say we're only going to go as high as Spot Track says is typical and requisite of a player of your skill set? You'd be the highest paid corner in the league, but it'd be 4 years, $62 million. Or would you give him what he wants and just say, screw it, it's only $6 million over the next 4 years. We'll go 4 years, $68 million. What do you do?
Well, I wouldn't offer him anything more than a 2-year extension. And at least, and I could be talked into a 2-year guaranteed part of the extension. Maybe it's a 3-year extension or 4-year extension, but only those first 2 years are guaranteed on it. But, the more I talk this out, I think the Lions end up playing the game, which is you've got him under contract and you franchise him at the end of the season. You try to work out an extension with him, but you're going to come to an impasse because, again, if it's me, I'm not willing to give up more than 2 years on the extension. There's the uncertainty of the collective bargaining agreement. There's the uncertainty of what he's going to be as a player a couple years down the road when he crests 30 years old. So I'm not willing to commit past that. So I'm going to say I got him for 2020 and then give him the extension that runs through 2022.
If you roughly franchise him, you're paying him the next 2 years, you're paying him $26.5 million. I wouldn't mind them coming to the table and saying, how about this? How about we rip up your current contract and we go 3 years.
50?
Yeah. Something like that.
I'm okay with that.
Something shorter term with a big bump in pay. You know what he's scheduled to make this year? $12 million. So would he be happy with a 3-year deal that would take him almost to $17 million a season? I mean, that's a record-breaking deal. It's shorter term. You will be less likely to regret that last year. You have a happy Darius, because you know what they can't afford? Not having Darius Slay this year.
Well, I agree.
And you know
with
what
that.
is the hell no scenario? Is trading him. I'm sorry, what they get back in the trade, unless it's an offer which is unrealistic, which is Darius Slay for a first and something, a first and a second, 2 firsts, like something ridiculous. They can't afford to let him walk. And if Matt Stafford is your quarterback, you can't be losing high-end talent as the Stafford window starts to shut. It's not shut. It's not shutting unless the injury makes it shut. If you're going to start over with Tua Tagovailoa, then by all means move Slay. But if Stafford's your quarterback, you can't let Slay walk. You can't trade him.
That's an important distinction to bring up. If Stafford's your quarterback, you can't let Slay walk. You're right. If Tua's your quarterback, you can afford to let Slay walk.
Yeah, because if Tua's your quarterback, or if you're gonna basically, if you're drafting Tua, even if it is to sit for a year, then I'm okay with trading Slay because you're clearly Tua's going to take over in the next couple of years. You may as well then move on from Stafford.
Mm-hmm.
So if Tua is at all in the plans, then trade Slay. If Slay is asking for more than you're willing, like he wants more than what Quandre Diggs tweeted, which was 4 years and $68 million, then I'd say, okay, that's fine. You're going to play under the current contract, and we're going to franchise you, and then you'll get to the open market because we're trying to win now. That's the minimum it would Darius Slay be on my roster for 2 years. 248-539-9797. Get your thoughts on this. How should the Lions handle Darius Slay? Some numbers are starting to become a little bit clearer, and it's really good reporting done by Chris Burke of The Athletic. Kang, I want